Today's topic, we are going to talk about some of the most commented questions and some of the most frequent questions that I see on the Facebook expat groups. I moderate a few of them. Reading the comments on these guys, as a matter of fact, I think gringo pricing is kind of a myth. If you have a good sense of humor, these will crack you up. I'd like to know about supermarket prices in Medellin. Do Colombian women wear wedding rings? This is a great question, and I'm going to tie it into hiring locals. They crack me up all of the time, and I love moderating them. So this lady asks, what other options than Airbnb are there to rent a place? I'm looking mostly in El Poblado and in Laureles. So the problem with a lot of foreigners coming down to Colombia and wanting to extend their stay for months or maybe even a year is the fact that most rental agencies in Colombia, you have to meet a few of their criteria, which is you obviously have to have the income to cover the rent and show that you can cover it. There's a certain amount that you have to have over the rent. On top of that, you need a cosigner. Hi everyone, just moved to Medellin with my partner who is Colombian. We found a place we really like, but the agency says we must have a tomador and fiador since we don't have a credit history, even though we both make well over the minimum required salary. Is this a give up situation or is there an alternative? Thanks in advance. A cosigner, someone in Colombia that can co-sign for you in case you default on the property or on the rental. That co-signer has to meet some requirements. And one of the requirements is that they can pay and then show proof that they can pay the amount that you're renting for. On top of that, that they own real estate in Medellin or in Colombia as a whole. There are very limited options, but I have a whole video on how to rent apartments in Medellin and not using Airbnb, but going off of Airbnb for a lower rate. You can Google arriendo de apartamento amoblado en Medellin as if you were a Colombian coming from another city to rent here, and you'll find a bunch of different agencies that cater to people coming here short term that are furnished apartments. Some of them are even unfurnished, and they cater to people that only have a passport, because that's another requirement that local rental agencies have, is that you have a local ID. So if you don't have a local ID and you don't have a cosigner, you can pretty much guarantee that you're not going to get a local apartment through most of the local rental agencies. I might get a contract for a U.S. citizen. He can pay me through an LLC company. I'm Colombian and I have a Payoneer and Bancolombia. Do you know which is the wiser way to request my payment? Or do you know other way? So what happens with this whole tax situation? When a foreigner leaves Colombia after staying 300 days, he didn't earn anything from Colombia, digital nomad. Is there something that happens at the airport? Asking for a friend, a wink, wink. If you are Colombian, or let's say you're not Colombian, but you become a tax resident in Colombia, this is a very common question that we have in the Medellin Masterclass, and this is why it's so valuable. But this is what I've learned over the last 14 years and in the last 10 years of running businesses here in Colombia. The fact of the matter is that Colombia does not share information with the United States. So I'm not telling you not to report this. I'm telling you the fact. The best thing in her case, if I were her, and I am her in many occasions, because all of my clients are in the United States, is to receive the money in an account that's not in Colombia, because you might have better, if you are like, let's say, a U.S. citizen and you set up an account in the United States through, let's say, an S corporation, you probably have a lot of tax breaks that you can take for that, as opposed to taking it to a personal account in Colombia. That would be my advice to her, is to take advantage of tax breaks as a business owner, whether it's in the United States and or in Colombia. I do both. I've never heard of immigration stopping anyone for tax-related matters, unless if it becomes like a crime that you're being prosecuted for. So if you're here 183 days, technically you are supposed to declare taxes. So what I would tell this guy is to talk to a local tax accountant, like the guys at nexo.legal, that speaks English and that can give you the rundown and help you file if need be. Do Colombian women wear wedding rings? Would be crazy to wear a $5,000 USD diamond ring in Medellin, isn't it? It depends. I've seen women, and I have friends that have been married and they've got really nice wedding rings and they wear them, but they're also not going to downtown or riding the bus. These are people that have cars. So that's a very big difference. A tourist walking around for a week with a $5,000 ring can definitely scream, rob me. $5,000 might not be much for a lot of people, but for a lot of people, it could be a lot, especially for someone from here where the minimum wage is like $350 or $380 per month. $5,000 goes a long way here. So just get a replacement ring, just like an iPhone. If you're a tourist and you don't know what's up in Colombia yet, even if you do, I know a lot of locals, like I don't do this, but I've got an iPhone 14 Pro. I go to the bar with it. I literally will walk up and down Calle 10. I go to the co-working space, walk all around Manila at 2 in the morning, 1 in the morning, and nothing's ever happened. I've never been robbed. But at the same time, I know where I'm going. I know the streets, etc. But if you're new here, you could get a burner phone. It's the same thing with the wedding ring. Why get a burner wedding ring? That's what I would do. Where is a good place to buy a burner phone for short-term use a month? Go to El Centro Comercial Monterrey. It has a bunch of cell phone shops that you can go. If you want an even cheaper phone, a used phone, you can go downtown. Calle 53, street number 53, is called, I think, Maracaibo. Yeah, it's called Maracaibo. I suggest that you go in the morning, daytime, not nighttime. Most of them close after 5 anyway. But you'll find a bunch of deals there on used cell phones, burner phones, smartphones, etc. They could even unlock iPhones there too. Although it's harder now with the newer versions of iPhones, but the older ones, I'm pretty sure they could do there. So check that out. My wife is looking for Spanish classes. Anyone knows an institute or person that gives Spanish classes? If you are not in Medellin, there are websites like Italki and or groups like this. I'm sure there are people that replied, like Daniela, who is a Spanish teacher, and she could probably do virtual classes. And it's going to be cheaper than hiring someone in your country. If you are here in Colombia, there are also Spanish schools. For example, most popular ones here in Manila is Elefun, and there's another one called Blink Spanish. All you got to do is a Google search, and you can see the reviews on TripAdvisor and on Google. Oh, and I forgot to mention, the guy that I interviewed, David, Colombian.Spanish on Instagram. You can find him, and he's a great teacher as well. You should learn Spanish. Ultimately, it will better your life in Medellin because the majority of the people here speak only Spanish. You're going to understand the culture. You're going to understand why things happen the way they do. When I first got here, I did this a lot. I would look at things and be like, why are they doing it so backwards? In the US, it works perfectly this one way. Why are they doing it this way? But once you understand the culture and the reason and the history behind why things happen the way they do, then your patient level goes up. Your patience level goes up and your life just becomes better and you become more relaxed. It's great. Any armchair experts on local CDTs? I'm interested in answering this question. How less safe are they than good old United States CDs? So in regards to safety, I understand it. I have invested in local CDs here. They're safe. They're super safe. Your money is safe there. The banking system here is pretty solid. Throughout the 14 years that I've been here, there's never been an issue where the bank took someone's, people's money and not giving it back type stuff, or the banks are failing. That's not an issue, and I don't see it for the foreseeable future. Why would you invest in a Colombian CD? Let's say you've got a ton of investments in your home country and other countries, and you want to diversify, keep some money in pesos. That makes sense. If you don't, then I don't see why you would want to invest in Colombia in the Colombian peso, because it will always be devalued against the United States dollar. So if you aren't diversified, if you don't have many investments, but you have a good chunk of money, I would say start in the United States or in the UK or whatever your home country is, because that dollar or that currency is probably going to be heavier than that of the Colombian currency. The reason why I roll my money over to a CD is the money that I have already brought here. For example, I sold an apartment. The money that I received there, instead of rolling it back into my US account, I don't care to convert it back to dollars. I leave it in Colombia and I put it in a CD. CDs can pay up to 15%. The problem is that they're not liquid, that there are processes to take money out. There are other forms of investment, for example, through companies like Acciones y Valores, where it's more liquid and the interest rate and the interest can be upwards to 19 to 20%. Those are very, very attractive. So make sure to look into that. Acciones y valores. But as far as safety, I think both are just as safe. I'd like to know about supermarket prices in Medellin. I know about gringo prices, but do they apply to a supermarket chain as well? First of all, there aren't enough gringos in the city for there to be gringo prices on food and supermarkets. Most of the people in the rich areas, I would say 95%, maybe even more, and this is just a number I'm making off the top of my head after 14 years of living here, are all Colombian. And these are rich Colombians that go to the bougie supermarkets that are more expensive. The Carulla and El Tesoro, that's the campesino one, which is like the organic one. Those prices are more expensive than if you go to the Carulla down the hill, even in El Poblado. So yes, the prices do differ, but it's not gringo pricing. As a matter of fact, I think gringo pricing is kind of a myth. Unfortunately, Colombia almost had double-digit inflation last year, almost 10% inflation. So prices on everything everywhere in the city went up, not just in El Poblado and pockets of Laureles where there's more tourism. Yes, the Airbnb prices have gone up in those areas, but rental prices in Manrique, where there is barely any, I don't think there's any Airbnbs up there, and it's 100% Colombian, went up. Prices went up on everything. This whole gringo pricing thing is made up by gringos. I don't know where, like Colombians don't even use the word precios gringos. That's not even a word in the vocabulary for Colombians. It's just, can I charge more to someone that looks like they've got money? That's the mentality in Colombia. So be aware of that. We're looking into cleaning companies to clean our apartment at least twice a month. This is a great question, and I'm going to tie it into hiring locals because this is related to that. If you're here long term and you hire someone and you're paying them cash to come clean your house twice a week, or even just once a week for a whole year, she is now technically an employee and is subject to what employees get, which is payment into Social Security, payment into the health care system, payment into other benefits, like, for example, like bonuses per year, etc. So let's say, because this has happened before, if you fire this cleaning lady that you're paying cash under the table after a year, after 2 years, after 5 years, I've seen this happen. She can come back and sue you for severance because you owe her severance because she was a domestic employee. That's why I always recommend these companies. I think this is the company that we found the greatest cleaning lady of all time, Hogaru. So, por tiempo completo, which means full-time, 4 to 6 days per week, starts at 65,900 plus aportes, which means plus extra fees, but they tell you that they pay into all of these mandatory things that you have to pay into for a salaried employee. So I always tell people, make sure to hire, if it's a domestic employee or anybody, make sure you're doing it legally. And the best way to hire a cleaning lady is through one of these websites that will do all of the heavy lifting for you. One of my favorite questions. I laughed so much when I read I'm reading the comments on these guys. If you have a good sense of humor, these will crack you up. They crack me up all of the time. And I love moderating them because, for one, I have very thick skin, so nothing offends me. And on top of that, I have a great sense of humor. I love reading some of the comments, as long as they're not hate comments or trolly comments. I don't delete them. But where do the adults date in Medellin? I'm referring to 28 and up. Guys, where do the people in Medellin date? Okay, so this is kind of like beating a dead horse because people talk about this all the time on these groups. Mostly it's meeting women because a lot of the people that are coming and are on these Facebook groups are guys that are single. And it's no secret that the women in Medellin are amazingly gorgeous and wonderful people. So I'll talk to you as I would to any of my Colombian friends about meeting women here. You meet them everywhere. If you're anywhere in the world, how do you attract other people? It's not even just for romantic relationships, but just making friends. How do you make friends in life? If you're not good at making friends, what is going to make you think that coming to Colombia, a social country, is going to change in your life? It's going to be the same. On top of that, you might not even speak the language, so you already have another barrier to entry into the social networking of in Medellin. Maybe you just are boring. you have to work on that. I remember this conversation that I had with a friend who's an expat that's been living here now for years. One of his questions was, when early on when he was down here, is attracting women. And I told him, if you feel that this is a sector or a section in your life that you're lacking in, how do you get better at anything? For example, let's say you want to start a business and you want to learn about business. How do you get better at business? You start studying it, and you start making friends, and you start acquiring mentors and surrounding yourself with people that do business or do the thing that you want to do. It's the same thing with making friends and relationships anywhere in the world, I believe. If you want to attract people, you have to become attractive. And God only gave me one body, and it wasn't Brad Pitt's body. I'm far from it. So I had to make my personality attractive. So doing things and working on yourself is how you attract people, and that's how dating is done in Medellin. A lot of people do use dating apps in Medellin. Colombians, even over the age of 28, use dating apps, but they're not inviting them over on the first date or going over to someone's house on the first date. There is a dating culture. The dating culture is not a hookup culture. There is very little of that happening. And if that's what you're looking for, then Medellin might not be for you, especially if you're only going to be here a limited amount of time. The best way to meet quality people in any country, I think, including Medellin, is to be interesting and to do interesting things and to just be a great person overall, having a great sense of humor, having a great personality. One of the best things that I love to do is volunteering, and I meet so many people through volunteering. I met one of my girlfriends through volunteering with kids here in Medellin, and I have a bunch of friends that's our common interest, is volunteering at orphanages or at the English classes on weekends. Like, that's my best advice for that. So I'm not saying stay away from the dating apps, but realize that the dating culture is different in Medellin. If you want to find someone of high quality, it's going to take time. It doesn't happen overnight.